Somewhere out there, someone is still watching. They walk among us unseen and unaccountable. The FBI estimates that in the United States, there could be up to 50 active serial killers at any given time. Unidentified, unapprehended, and striking when we least expect it. And today, we're going to take a step into that shadowy world of those who kill, leave no trace, and seemingly disappear into the night. These are some of the most chilling, unsolved cases that leave investigators haunted until this day. These are serial killers that were never caught. We're starting out with one of the more recent people on this list, and that's the Little Rock slasher. The year is 2021, and you're walking down the street alone around 3 in the morning. It's just another normal night until you're approached by a random man, and he stabs you 15 times. That's exactly what happened to one of his victims, but she was found stumbling around, covered in her blood, and she was taken to a hospital where she was the only survivor of the Little Rock slasher. He did, however, claim the lives of 3 more people, and part of what made him so scary is that he would go after anyone, man or woman, with seemingly no motive in random acts of violence. The one thing that all these victims did have in common, though, was being caught off guard and alone at nighttime. He was active from 2020 to 2021, and all that's known about him at this time was the description given by his surviving victim and some grainy security photos. But the only description she was able to give is that he's a black man, above 6 feet tall with a slim build. He hasn't been active since 2021, and unfortunately at this point, it seems like the case has gone cold. Next, we have the Colonial Parkway murders. Between 1986 and 1989, a quiet stretch of road in Virginia became the hunting ground for one of America's most mysterious serial killers. 4 couples seemingly vanished along the Colonial Parkway, which is a 23-mile stretch of road. It started October 12, 1986. 2 friends named Kathleen and Rebecca were found just off the Colonial Parkway inside Kathleen's white Honda Civic. Both of their throats were slit, and their car was covered in diesel fuel as if someone had tried to start a fire. And what makes this even more unsettling is the fact that there were no signs of robbery or sexual assault, meaning this is just a random act of brutal violence. And what investigators didn't know is that this was only the beginning. Over the following 3 years, 3 more couples disappeared on or along that same stretch of road. And every scene was eerily similar. 2 victims inside or near a car with no signs of robbery or assault, just calculated violence. And it didn't take long for locals to realize they had a serial killer on their hands, hunting young couples along the Colonial Parkway. The FBI referred to him as a methodical killer and believed they could be dealing with someone from the military or law enforcement. They were comfortable approaching people in remote areas late at night, and they knew how to control a scene. The Colonial Parkway runs close to several military bases, including the Navy, and a lot of the victims had ties to the Navy or local colleges. And even after hundreds of leads and countless DNA testing, the case remains open till this day. Although in 2024, a man by the name of Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was listed as a suspect to these cases, but he's been deceased since 2017. He has no criminal record, was never in the national database, and he has only been linked to some of the Colonial Parkway murders. Now heading down to Mexico, we have the toy car killer. In one of Mexico's most dangerous cities, the police started finding bodies of men that had been tortured, shot, and left in the streets. But what really came as a shock wasn't how they died, it's what the killer left behind. They carefully left toy cars on or around their victims. It started in 2019 in Sinaloa, deep inside cartel territories. The police found a man lying face down with multiple gunshot wounds, with 11 toy cars methodically placed along his spine. At first, it just seemed like another execution, which is not uncommon there. But this was different. It wasn't random, it was completely deliberate, and they were trying to send a message. And within weeks, another body showed up, and this time they left 13 toy cars. So at this point, it seems like they have a vigilante or vigilantes on their hands targeting car thieves. And investigators soon started to realize that the number of toy cars were not random. Well, the locals started to whisper, and some people claimed that the amount of toy cars left at the scene were the amount of cars that the deceased victims had stolen. So these weren't completely innocent people. They're rumored to be car thieves, part of Sinaloa's underground black market. So they had a clear-cut motive, and whoever was behind this wasn't just committing these murders at random. The media gave him the name the Toy Maker, or as he later became known online, the Toy Car Killer. And the police weren't sure what to make of this. Did they have a vigilante serial killer on their hands, or was this the work of the cartel? But nobody ever saw him, nobody ever survived him, and every time the police would get close, the trail went cold. But in late 2019, the killing suddenly stopped and he wasn't heard from again. That was until May of 2023 when another victim was found dead with a toy car in his hand. And yet again, in January of 2024, another victim was found with 10 to 15 toy cars placed around him. Now, the attack in 2024 was the last case I was able to find, but with that only being last year, I think it's safe to say that he could still easily be out there waiting and watching. Now, heading back to America, we have the West Mesa Bone Collector. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, one of the most chilling serial killer cases in American history remained hidden until 2009. On February 2nd, 2009, a woman was walking her dog in a remote area just west of Albuquerque when she discovered something unusual. There were bones partially visible on the sand, and she called the police, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to discover. They found the remains of 11 women and one unborn child. Now, a lot of these victims were methodically buried and covered, but what led to this discovery was the lazy burial of some of the victims. And a lot of these victims were tied to poverty, addiction, and prostitution, which commonly leads to the system completely overlooking them. A lot of killers choose victims similar to that because they're a lot less likely to be immediately missed, and the police have a lot less pressure about solving those cases. And possibly the worst part is these murders were committed from 2001 to 2005, meaning these women could have been missing anywhere from 4 to 8 years. And the police called this one of Albuquerque's most complex investigations of all time. Because of the remote location, it made this a lot more difficult, and due to the fact that they were all skeletal remains when they were found, they were unable to determine a cause of death. The forensic experts believe that the killer acted alone, and he more than likely knew the area and lured the women from the city out to the desert. And despite extensive investigation, interviews, and evidence collection, no suspect has ever been arrested for the crimes. To this day, the identity of the West Mesa Bone Collector remains unidentified, and since this just happened within the last 20 years, he could still very well be out there watching over Albuquerque. The next person on our list is the New Bedford Highway Killer. In the late 1980s, along the quiet highways and ramps of New Bedford, Massachusetts, a monster remained unseen. It started in 1988, and by just April of 1989, at least 9 women had been found murdered, and 2 more disappeared without a trace. He would dump the bodies on off-ramps and wooded highway shoulders. It started in March of 1988, and most of his victims fit the same common description of vulnerable women struggling with poverty, addiction, and prostitution. In July of 1988, the bodies of one of his victims was found just off the highway in Dartmouth, and just a few months later, another one of his victims' bodies would be found under the trees just near Reed Road Ramp. And at this point, a pattern started to form. There were bodies of multiple vulnerable women just off highways where nobody would look. And by spring of 1989, 9 bodies had been found, and 2 more women were missing, presumed to be victims of the same fate. All the victims were in their late 20s to 30s, and they all disappeared from New Bedford, but their bodies were found in Dartmouth, Freetown, and Westport. And despite decades of search from the Massachusetts State Police Cold Case Unit, the case still remains cold to this day. Over the years, there's been several different suspects, but none of them had enough evidence to get convicted of any of these crimes. So why were they never able to catch or identify the killer? Well, a major reason is these bodies were dumped in remote locations, and they were exposed to weather for weeks, which compromised a lot of the DNA and forensic evidence. And the killer more than likely drove these highways regularly, blending in with common traffic and disappearing into the dark. Next up, we have one of the more high-profile cases on the entire list, the I-70 killer. The year is 1992, and you're working another slow shift at work alone when a strange man walks in. He asks you to go grab him something, and you think this is another normal customer interaction, so of course you go grab it for him. But while you're turned around grabbing the item for him, you hear the click of a gun, and before you can even react, it's all over. And that's exactly what he would do to his victims. And he got the name of the I-70 killer because all of his attacks happened just a couple miles off of the I-70 highway. The I-70 highway is one of the biggest highways in the United States, stretching over 2,000 miles all the way from Utah to Maryland. It's believed that the killer was active from 1992 to 1994, but he's been attributed with murders as recent as 2001. There's not much known information about the I-70 killer, but the reason that all of these attacks track back to him is because they're committed in very specific ways. Almost all of the victims were women working alone just a couple miles off the I-70 highway, and they were all executed with a 22mm bullet to the back of the head. The murders were precisely executed, and he would usually take small amounts of cash. And since only small amounts of cash went missing, the robbery only appears to be a secondary motive behind the killing. Or it's also believed that the robberies could have been potentially staged to throw off the investigators. But there were two unorthodox cases, one where he had a male victim and another case where he killed two victims at once. The investigators believe that he went after the man thinking he was a female because he wore his hair in a long ponytail, and it's also believed that he may have targeted the store because it has a more feminine name, Sylvia's Ceramics. And when he took out his two victims at the same time, it's believed that he thought the woman was working alone, but the store owner was also there, and he took out both victims at once. And to this day, it's believed that there's at least 6 to over 10 victims attributed to the I-70 killer. The only evidence they have of him is eyewitness accounts that describe him to be a 5'7" to 5'9" white male with a slim build in his 20s to 30s. The authorities believe that he could either be a trucker, a drifter, or someone that commonly traveled on I-70 for work. And the FBI stated that a disproportional amount of serial killers are truck drivers because they live a lifestyle on the road where they're constantly in different places. Next up, we have another recent case, the South Memphis prostitute killings. In early 2011, the streets of South Memphis became a hunting ground. Over the span of just a few weeks, 4 women were found shot and dumped near a cemetery, although one did survive. On January 27, 2011, his first victim was found around 2:15 in the morning, shot and dumped near a cemetery. Just a few weeks later, on February 20th, his next victim was found and she had suffered the exact same fate. And just 4 days later, the next victim was found shot on a block right nearby. And just 2 days after that, the 4th and final victim was shot but survived and ran for help. And investigators believe that all these crimes may be linked because they happen in a confined area of South Memphis and all these women work the streets. The victim that survived the attack gave a description for the police sketch, and she described him as being a black male, around 24 years old with cornrows, driving either a Dodge Charger or a Chrysler 300. DNA from the crime scenes matched a similar male profile, but the DNA was inconclusive in identifying the man. And just like a lot of other cases that we've covered, the victim's profession working in the streets put them in a very vulnerable position. And in Memphis, a lot of the streets surrounding that Mount Carmel cemetery where a lot of these attacks happened are known for motels and prostitution. And since then, there's been more victims in the same profession that were killed in that same area. But instead of being shot, they were killed with different methods like stabbing, so they're unsure if these killings are attributed to the same original killer. And moving on to our final case, we have the Eastbound Strangler. In the fall of 2006, the bright lights of Atlantic City masked a much darker reality. Just beyond the casinos outside Atlantic City, someone was staying at a motel with their dog. As they take their dog out for a walk, the dog's very interested by something behind the motel in a drainage ditch. And feeling suspicious about this whole thing, they go back to their motel room and call the cops, but they had no clue what they just found. Because inside that drainage ditch, there were 4 dead women. And probably the most disturbing part of this is how the bodies were disposed. All the bodies were methodically laid out about 6 feet apart from each other, all their heads facing eastbound, and they were still fully clothed except for their socks and shoes. They all died from strangulation, and like most every victim on this list, they were all sex workers as well. And with all the victims facing east and suffering from strangulation, that's where the name Eastbound Strangler came from. Unfortunately, there's little to no information known about who committed these acts, and with this being within the last 20 years, this guy could very well still be out there, and he could still be increasing his kill count to this day. The only reason that these were even linked together is because the bodies were found in the same spot. But with this being 20 years ago, it doesn't seem very hopeful that the eastbound strangler is going to be caught. If you enjoyed this video, liking, subscribing, or commenting is a huge help to me, and it would be greatly appreciated. But that's all I have for you guys today, so if there are any more topics you want me to cover in the future, please let me know down below. I appreciate you watching till the end of the video, and I'll see you guys next time.